Hi everyone, and welcome to the Millennial Revolt, an independent political talk show that seeks to bring a different narrative than the stale one we have going on right now in mainstream media. And welcome to the first show of 2017. I hope everyone had a wonderful new year. Today we're going to be talking about the Washington Post, and we're going to be talking about their continued habit of posting fake news stories as far as Russia is concerned. And this comes at a time when people in our political elite on the left and the right, as well as people in our mainstream media, are just engulfed in this whole Russia phobia narrative, as well as many people in Western Europe. And this is becoming a problem as far as the United States working with Russia politically and diplomatically on various issues. Now, thankfully, we had citizen journalists break this whole story down, and eventually the Washington Post had to issue a retraction because of the fake news story that they put out. Now, there's so much to talk about, so let's just get right into it. So recently, the Washington Post put out a story that read, "Russian hackers penetrate U.S. electric grid through a utility in Vermont," officials say. That was the opening title of their story. Now, this is extremely important because of what the mainstream media has been pushing. They've been pushing the lie that the Russians hacked into the US election. Now, mind you, President Obama has said so himself, that before President-elect Trump was awarded the presidency through the Electoral College, because we are a constitutional republic, the US elections could not be hacked. Then Hillary Clinton lost. The mainstream media, who was pushing that she would win with basically 100% certainty, they were proven to be false. And then all of a sudden, the Russians hacked the election. Now, given the hysteria that people in the mainstream media are trying to make the American public believe, that basically Russians are trying to attack us. We're living in the 50s. People need to duck, hide. The Cold War is here, basically. The Washington Post started off their story saying that Russian hackers were up to their no-good tricks again and managed to penetrate the U.S. electricity grid through a utility in Vermont. The Washington Post got a quote from Vermont's Governor Peter Schmullen, who said that Americans should be both alarmed and outraged by these actions perpetrated by one of the world's leading thugs, Vladimir Putin. And then he also called for, in the same breath, more retaliatory actions from the Obama administration. Now, as you know, President Obama is going to be stepping down in a few weeks, and President-elect Trump is going to be taking the oath of office and going to be officially sworn in as our 45th president. Now, in the last few weeks, President Obama has done some pretty bad things which will affect the U.S.-Russian relations politically and diplomatically. He has expelled Russian diplomats from our country and has imposed more sanctions. Mind you, he has provided no evidence for the accusations that he has made that Russia has supposedly hacked the US election. And now you have a governor who, before information was even given in this case in Vermont, was already calling for the administration to provide more sanctions. This is the kind of fear-mongering that the Washington Post was trying to generate so you can have certain portions of the population, mostly Clinton supporters, who now some of them believe, not all of them, but some of them believe that Russia had a hand in electing President-elect Trump. And you will also have war-hungry neoliberals and neocons such as John McCain, Lindsey Graham, the typical suspects, and you have Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, to jump on the Russophobia train and impose more sanctions and just tie the president-elect's hands politically when he wants to engage in actual détente with Russia, so we are not at odds with a nuclear-armed country. Again, they have as much nuclear weapons as us. I'm more of a person who is of the firm belief that we should have good relationships with Russia. It doesn't make any sense while we're constantly at odds with a country who is basically doing nothing to us. Everybody hacks. We recently hacked into Angela Merkel. There was a big thing about that. China is hacking into our systems more than Russia is. And again, there were no retaliatory measures. The media was not up in arms about this. It's this selective and phony outrage that I truly don't understand, which boggles my mind. Vermont Governor Peter Schmollen went on to say that Vladimir Putin has been attempting to hack into Vermont's electric grid. He's saying which Vermonters rely upon to support their quality of life, their economy, their health, and their safety. He said that this episode should highlight the urgent need for the federal government to vigorously pursue and put an end to this sort of Russian meddling. Now, Vermont Senator Patrick Lee took the rhetoric to a whole new level, and he was making the claims that a diabolical Russian plot was being pursued to shut down the U.S. electric grid in the middle of winter and basically kill half of the population in Vermont in an instant. Now, this is this sort of hysteria that is engaging our political elite, and this is dangerous because these people affect policy. Here's what I don't understand, and this is why these sort of episodes frustrate me. And I want to say this. If it is proven by non-partisan governmental agencies that Russia has hacked with evidence into our electrical grids, into our US elections, then I will believe them. I do not trust any of our intelligence agencies for various reasons. Why? Because these were the same people who lied about the Gulf of Tonkin, which got us into the Vietnam War on faulty information. These are the same people who said that Saddam Hussein had WMDs, which they never had. This is the same people which illegally attacked two countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. These are the same people who were saying that Muammar Gaddafi was basically killing all of his people in Libya. We find out years later that this is all faulty information. The same thing when they were saying that Bashar al-Assad was gassing his people in Syria. We're slowly finding out, because of independent journalists, that all of this information is false. So our intelligence agencies has a history of putting information out there for political purposes to pursue certain agendas that people are trying to push in our government. And I think it's really important that we have people with a level head, because you're only going to keep poking and keep poking Russia and keep poking and making accusations against this country without any evidence, mind you, before they retaliate. And before we get to this point, and before we get to a point where President-elect Trump can't even engage with Russia diplomatically and politically so we can advance both of our common interests, we're going to have a situation where we're going to have the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives on the left and the right blocking any things that he wants to do as far as Russia is concerned. The Washington Post, with their responsible and ethical journalists who always fact check a story before putting it out there, didn't even bother to contact the Burlington Electric Department to confirm the story that they were running on their newspaper. Now, the Burlington Electric Grid had to release a statement refuting the Washington Post story, calling it fake news. Now, they issued a statement assuring Vermont residents that their electric grid had not been hacked, but rather a single laptop not connected to the grid had been found to have a malware virus. And this is the sort of journalism that is in our mainstream media nowadays. This is the sort of standards that newspapers accept. Not fact-checking any of your sources, not getting all of the information before you put a story out there. Just print. Not even bothering to make sure what you print is true. Don't even care about who this may hurt. Don't even care about what it will do to our country as a whole. Just putting it out there. This is the sort of irresponsible, disgusting behavior that has been in our legacy media, in our newspapers, in our TV news for decades now. It is extremely irresponsible for a newspaper which has multiple Pulitzer Prizes for doing amazing journalistic work back in the day. And this is what they have been reduced to: printing fake stories for political purposes. It's sad. It's actually very sad to watch. As I said, the Washington Post eventually had to issue a retraction. They made an editor's note saying that they were incorrect and that officials had no indication that the Russians were ever involved in the Vermont electric grid incident. Now, the Washington Post did this earlier in November when they posted a story which they had to eventually come out and correct, saying that Russia had influenced the US presidential campaign via a massive fake news campaign. One of the sources for this article was Prop or Not, which was a very shady Twitter account. I did a video about them in one of my stories entitled Fake News Hysteria, where they listed basically 200 websites alleging that they were spreading Russian propaganda. Now, these websites were from the left and the right. They have criticized the United States foreign policy about various issues. They've also criticized NATO, and it seemed that anybody who was doing this was labeled Russian agents. After many people on this website complained, the Washington Post had to issue a correction saying that they could not vouch for the validity of Prop or Not's findings. And also, which was very strange about this, none of these people would go on record because they supposedly feared that Vladimir Putin's army of trolls would harass them on Twitter. So this is the kind of stories that the Washington Post has routinely put out into the atmosphere about fake news. And it's just getting to the point where Americans are turning away from the legacy media because of their continued failure to not even hold themselves to any sort of journalistic standards, and the editors and journalists and people who own these companies holding them to some standards, and there are no consequences for putting fake news out there that are proven by citizen journalists. Ordinary citizens are breaking down these news stories for themselves and posting their findings so people can find it out. In the age of digital information, where we have information at our fingertips, on our small devices, on our iPhones, on our Galaxies, on our iPads, any of these sort of devices, you don't think we can't break down these stories by ourselves and find out the information? This is why you see the New York Times renting, I think it was 8 floors in their building, because they're constantly losing money. This is why you see multiple people constantly breaking down the Washington Post's stories, proving them to be false. Because these people can't hold themselves to account and can't put out stories with accurate information regardless of their political biases. It doesn't matter who you support. If you are on the left or the right, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. You can have an opinion, but you have to put the facts out there and allow your reader to make a judgment for themselves, not try to influence your audience because you feel a certain type of way. And unfortunately, many journalists nowadays don't seem to have that sort of balance. So I will definitely keep you guys updated on stories like this, because I think it's important given what is happening with our mainstream media, our legacy media, and the state that they are in. Unfortunately, there are too many people who will tend to believe the lies rather than the truth. And I've said this multiple times, and I will continue to say this. Many people in the alternative media, I feel that we have a responsibility to accurately report on information now, because I find that a lot of people are turning to alternative news sources, online news sources, to find information about what's happening in the world. And I especially hold this responsibility and take this responsibility very seriously, because I do believe that we need an accurate and honest news media to hold our politicians to account, to hold our government to account. Whether you're on the left or the right, It doesn't matter of your political biases. All it matters is you telling the truth and allowing your audience to make a judgment for themselves. So, as I said, I will definitely keep you guys updated. Don't forget to turn on the bell notification if you are subscribed so you can see my latest videos as they pop up. And I want to leave you guys with a quote that becomes more relevant every single day, which is becoming a little bit frightening to me. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching, and you have a wonderful day. Bye.